Welcome back to the Abundant Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Pereira, founder of Abundance Practice Building. And I'm here with Dr. Ann Krajewski. This is her second time on the pod, and I wanted to have her back because she does things differently than most therapists. She is nomadic. Or I guess you're probably less nomadic now than you once were, but with this baby, but
Yes.
you are international.
Yes.
You are living not in the United States and you are licensed in the United States. And so you help therapists do some of the same if they want to get out in the world some while still having their career. So thanks for being here,
Yes.
Anne.
Yes, I'm so excited to be back. It's so wonderful.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions therapists might have around how to do this, if they can do this, what it looks like. Tell me what you see.
I think the first misconception I hear literally almost every day is that it's not legal, that a therapist license first restricts them from being able to go abroad, or their malpractice insurance won't cover them. Those are I think the two biggest legal misconceptions I hear.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love to tell therapists, I love to debunk that misconception because actually, I feel like it was when COVID happened, so many therapists were told, okay, your clients have to be inside the state you're licensed. And I think so many of us just assumed that also meant that we had to be inside the state we're licensed. But actually, your state licensing board really only cares about where your client is, because that's what the purpose of the state licensing board is, to help protect the client.
Mm-hmm.
There are some state licensing boards that theoretically, I've never come across one, but theoretically, some people have said that their state licensing board restricts their location. But from all of the ones I've looked up and looked into, all of them just restrict where the client is. And so that's one that I love to debunk because I think so many people go into grad school and are fear mongered. And so when
Mm-hmm.
they get out of grad school and get their license, they're like, oh my God, I don't want to lose this piece of paper. And this is one of the things I feel like they get so afraid of, but it's not your licensing board doesn't own you. They don't get to restrict necessarily where your location is. So
Right.
I
Well,
feel
it's
like that's the
interesting
biggest one.
with so many therapists that are licensed in so many different states.
Yeah.
I think about PsyPact. How does that work if you have to be in the state, you know?
Yes.
So,
That is one thing I will say. PsyPact is one of the only things I've heard that actually restricts your location, which is insane. I do not understand it. But as a psychologist for PsyPact, I can't use it because you have to be inside your state of licensure, like your home state, essentially.
oh, okay. Hmm.
Your state's license might not restrict you, but PsyPact does, which I think is ridiculous. But that is the one caveat I will
So
say.
that's interesting. Okay. So as long, let's say I was a psychologist in North Carolina and I had PsyPact, I can be seeing clients in all these other states as long as my body is in North Carolina.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. But if you're just seeing clients in North Carolina, I'm probably 99% sure North Carolina does not care where you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
They only
Okay.
care as long as your clients are there. And so if you're a psychologist, sadly, you can't use the wonderful thing, which is PsyPact, if you want to travel abroad. But I found, I feel like a lot of therapists think that they have to get licensed in multiple states to have a profitable practice, but I don't think
Yeah.
that's true. I think you're fine with just one.
Yes, I
But I think
promise
so
you,
many of
they're
them
like,
get licensed in five different states. And I'm like, you do
yeah.
not have to do that.
And
I
I would
promise.
say it actually slows things down in terms of building and marketing your practice because
Yeah.
you're in this situation where now you have to market in multiple places, which takes a lot more
Yes.
time and energy.
So much. You're spreading your eggs in too many different baskets, and you're having to
Yeah.
pay, all of those fees in terms of licensing, the getting licensed again or renewing. It's too much. I'm licensed in three states and I'm like, I don't like it. I
Yeah.
don't know why I did this. I'm like, I
Yeah.
want to
It's a
go
lot to
back to
keep up
just
with.
one.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can.
Um, yes. And then the other thing is a lot of people think malpractice insurance doesn't cover you, but there are some malpractice insurances that don't won't cover you if you're physically located abroad. But there are three that I personally know of, which is the Trust, American Professional Agency, and CPH. They all, as long as the file is claimed in the United States, so it's with your United States clients, and you're following the rules and regulations of your state board, they will cover you as long, like if you're physically located abroad at the time of service. So that's another one people get really afraid of, but that's usually not a problem at all. Like if your malpractice insurance has an issue, you can just switch.
Mhm.
But that's another one that I feel like they often are like, no, my malpractice insurance doesn't let me. And I'm like, no,
Uh-huh.
just switch.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think this also speaks to, and probably the other misconceptions we talk about are going to, this speaks to resistance. If therapists are
Yes.
talking to you about this, they want to be doing it, but they're hitting up against
Mhm.
their own fear that has nothing to do with
Yes.
certain things
Yeah.
that like they just need to do to be able to do what they want to do. And we all have these
Yes.
blocks, but yeah, they're just throwing blocks in front of themselves that don't even need to exist.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I think like it's interesting because I think like some malpractice insurances, for example, don't allow you, but I think oftentimes they're like, oh, one won't allow me. And so that means that it's like none will allow me. Like it's not even a thing that's possible. And so, yeah, I feel like people come up to one roadblock and then think it's not like it's just like, oh, I have to throw this out the window now.
Mhm.
But that's not true. Like I think if
Yeah.
you hit a roadblock, there's definitely other ways around it. You just have to kind of get creative. But I think that's probably very true for a lot of things when it comes to business and private practice. And I'm sure you see it every day as well,
Yeah.
helping therapists build practices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we need to
Uh-huh.
be like willing to do our own research and like get scrappy sometimes
Yes.
instead of just being like,
Yes.
well, the first malpractice insurance I ever signed up for doesn't allow this, so I guess I don't get to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Even if I'm like, your licensing board doesn't allow it, if you're that unicorn licensing board, which I'm still determined to find them because people say they're there and I'm like, where? But
Hmm.
if you do, like, you can get licensed in another state. There's plenty of other states that allow it. Like, obviously, you might have to start over with marketing and things, but if you want to go abroad and that's your dream, I mean, there's a way. But
Right. And it takes
yeah,
work. I think that's another thing that like
yes,
in this environment with the platforms and insurance
yes,
being evil and all sorts of things,
yes,
it makes sense. It just makes sense to, if you want to build the thing you want to build, it's going to take work. It's not going to be
yes,
easy. So I would love
yes,
for therapists to start to really embrace this. Was there a time when it was easy?
yes.
Yes, there was a time. And I'm sorry it's not 2021.
I know.
I would love it to be
Yes.
2021 from a marketing perspective for all of us. And if you want this, work for it. No big deal. You've
Yes.
worked for things in the past. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you have a whole master's and a license.
Right.
Like, you
Yeah.
worked really hard.
Yeah.
But I also think it's like a hard this is something I see too. It's like when it comes to marketing, people just want it to be easy and I'm like, like
Sorry.
I wish it was true. I wish it was easy, but
Yeah. I would sign up for
like
easy all
building
day.
something good takes work, you
Yeah.
know. But
Totally.
that is the next myth I have is that it's not profitable to have a virtual private practice. Like I think a lot of people nowadays are like, oh, people want in person, or like I feel like there's like this thing going around where it's like, oh, well, to be competitive as a therapist in private practice nowadays, you need to have an in-person office. And, so I think there's a lot of misconceptions that you can't have a virtual practice anymore now, like
Mm.
post-COVID. But I definitely think this is a myth because I have a profitable virtual practice and I know plenty of other people that do as
Yes.
well.
Yes. I mean, the majority
Um,
of therapists I work with have virtual practices.
right.
So
Yeah.
it's fine.
And
The
I think it's
platforms are all
interesting,
virtual. Like, I mean,
right?
yeah.
Literally. Well, and I think, as someone who's been coaching therapists in this, I often ask, I'm like, okay, well, like, how are you marketing to virtual people now? And they're like, oh, well, I'm not. I'm like either working for a practice that, for like has them be in person or they have in person on their website. And I'm like, well, if you're talking to people who, like, if you're speaking to in person, people are going to want in person or are going to ask
Right.
for that. But if you clearly state on your website or you even try to position virtual as a benefit, which there are, like, obviously I can understand, like, some people think in person has its benefits, which it does. But like I'm like, if you're speaking to in person, then in person people are going to seek you out. And if you're speaking to virtual people are going to seek you out.
Hmm.
But then also, I think to your point earlier, that like I do think because of COVID, there are a lot of stories that circulate about virtual therapy
Hmm.
that, a therapist lets their family walk in their room or like the therapist is in the kitchen. And, I think there
Right.
are some like horror stories, especially because of like BetterHelp and all of these platforms that don't pay the therapist well, and so
Hmm.
therapists are, maybe not able to provide the best quality care or there's just bad therapists out there too. That I do think that there is a little bit more legwork you might have to do to show trust to the client. And so that's what I also like to tell people if they want to build a virtual practice that, they do need to care about marketing and they have to put effort into marketing. Like you want to build that trust with whoever's landing on your website. Because if you're just being compared to another therapist who also has general marketing, but they offer in person, that person might be like, oh, it'll be like it, they might want to trust that person more or whatever. But
Hmm.
I like to like I feel like this is a myth that it is possible to build a profitable practice that's virtual. But you do have to do some legwork. But I think that's true for in-person people as well. Like I don't think
Hmm.
um yeah, like you're saying, I think the days where people are banging down your door to get into therapy isn't true anymore. I think there's, the field is there's just a lot more competition, but I feel like it's easy to be like competitive because you just need to invest in your website and the words on your website.
Hmm.
And you could be like a leg up from probably 90% of therapists.
Right. Right. I think that that's an interesting thing that people are like, I mean, you do need to help people find your website. Like there are things you need
Yes.
to do. If you're not established,
Yes.
like that's more of an uphill battle than it once was, but having a website that really speaks to your ideal client is like night and day, gonna make a
Yeah.
difference.
Yes, like the therapist I coach and I help them niche down. And I hear so many times, oh, I updated my website or my psychology today with my niche, and someone that I'm speaking to reached out. And I'm like, it
Mhm.
works. I'm
Yeah,
telling
look
you.
at that. Yeah,
It's like they're so surprised.
yeah,
But it
yeah,
totally, it's yeah, I feel like you have to do certain things, but it is completely possible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, the next myth that I have is that it's too expensive. I think a lot of therapists, when they think about like going abroad or taking their private practice abroad, are feel like they have to have a ton of money saved up. Like they get really scared about, needing like a huge cushion. There was a therapist who I like first spoke to like years ago and I've reached out to her recently and she's still like, I still don't have enough money saved. And I'm like, that to me, I'm like, okay, that is fear. Like that is,
Hmm.
a mindset thing. Because actually living abroad is like, it is, I think it's so wild how inexpensive it is compared to the United States.
Depending on where you are, right? Like if you're going to London or Paris, maybe not.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah.
But even, even then, I think groceries are cheaper in those. Like,
Mhm.
I think there are things like you go to Paris and you probably can walk. You're not having to pay insurance and a car payment, So I
Mhm.
think there are a lot of ways in which, rent might be comparable, but there's a lot of living expenses. Health insurance is much more affordable. So
Mhm.
there's just a lot of things about day-to-day life in America that are just so much more reasonable in another country. But I think the misconception a lot of people tend to have is it's like, okay, you're going on a 2-week vacation. Like for some people who have only been abroad for vacations might assume like, oh, it's really expensive because of when you go on a 2 week vacation, you're spending so much more money. But when you're, spending a month or two in a place, it's so much more affordable. And so that's when I like to tell people because I think they just assume it's so expensive and that they have to have this like huge savings to do it, which I mean, I will say like if you're wanting to immigrate to another country or get a visa, like a longer term visa, that that country might have like will probably have some financial barrier or sometime requirement for you to be able to have a longer term visa. But I feel like that's a lot less different than assuming that it's just going to be really expensive. But
Hmm.
like I lived abroad for like 2 years and I had a emergency fund, but I didn't touch that emergency fund until I went on maternity leave for my
Hmm.
daughter. And that was the only reason I did it was because it was a maternity leave. But so I think like a lot of people like think that it's really expensive. But it's really wild how it's not expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, where were you when we were talking last time? Was it Thailand?
I think the first, I was in Morocco and then the next time I was in Thailand.
That's right. That's right. Um, yeah. And so just thinking about how you were giving some details on like what it costs to live. And it's like, oh, like if
Yeah.
you have an established practice already and you want to do
Yes.
this, holy damn, like
Oh,
your money's
yeah.
going to go so much farther in so many places.
So much further. It's
Yeah.
so insane. Like, well, and I mean, I guess since the last time we talked, I can even speak to, I think, one thing people also are like, oh, well, what about medical stuff? It's so expensive. Um, but I didn't have health insurance when I was living abroad. Like I would just pay out of pocket, which it was like, I had to go to the urgent care and it was like what, $20 in Bali,
Mhm. Uh-huh.
where it's like in the States, that's like $150.
Easy. Yeah.
Um, but I didn't have health insurance. Like I had like a more like a travel insurance that included like emergency health care, like if something were to happen, but that was like $50 a month. But I even like gave birth to my daughter in Thailand, and that was ended up having to have a C-section. So I ended up paying the most that I would have had to pay because I had to pay for a natural birth and a C-section, the way their hospital
Hmm.
works. And I only spent like it was less than $6,000,
Wow.
which is like some people pay that with health insurance.
Right.
And
Right.
that's like probably what you're paying for premiums.
Right. Yeah, you
And
still wouldn't have
that
met my deductible at 6,000.
right, exactly. And especially as, that's, even speaking to people who have employers who pay their health insurance, like as therapists, I think it's so expensive to have health insurance because you're having to pay completely out of pocket. And it can be really expensive. And anyways, but living abroad, like I save so much money on health insurance and I feel like I get so much better quality care. I could have paid significantly less if I was at a different hospital, but the hospital I was at was like the top notch, like 5-star hotel, the
Hmm.
hospital, and it was
Yeah.
still cheaper than what people pay to have crappy quality care in the United States.
Hmm.
Um, and so, that's like another thing is like people are like afraid of like, well, what if an emergency happens? And I'm like, I promise you the emergency is going to cost significantly less than if you were in the States.
Hmm. Yeah. What are some other misconceptions?
Okay, so another misconception is time zones make it too complicated,
Hmm.
which this one, I love to talk about this one too. Just because, yes, time zones can be something you have to navigate. And there are a couple of things that I feel like you have to do to set yourself up well. But in general, I think time zones aren't, as terrible as some people might assume. But I think oftentimes when people are like, oh, but like time zones, they think like, oh, well, that's not changing their schedule with their clients.
Right.
Like people are afraid to change their schedule. Like there was a student I was working with and she like in my accelerator that I ran, who was like, oh, well, like my clients, I see them in the evenings. And if I want to go to Turkey, because she really wanted to go to Turkey, like I would be working in the middle of the night. And I'm like, oh, well, like, could you just move them to the morning time? And she was like, oh, like almost like too afraid to do that. But I think oftentimes like people are like, oh, well, I have to run my US practice exactly the same. Like I can't change anything. Like I have to keep my clients like in the evenings. That's the only time they'll ever be able to see me. And so if I try to go to somewhere like Europe, then I'm going to be working until 2 a.m. Um, which I just don't like. I'm like, I think people are a lot more flexible. Like your clients are going to be a lot more flexible than you're assuming.
Yeah.
And I think that was something I fell into because I like my kind of lore is I kind of impulsively moved to Morocco. Like I was already
Mhm.
virtual, then I kind of impulsively moved to Morocco. And I was seeing people until 2 a.m. And I was seeing them from like 5 p.m. to like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., depending on the time zone, like um the States does the time change, but a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
other countries do not do the time change.
Mhm.
But anyway, so I was seeing people until 2 a.m., but then when I got pregnant, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Mhm.
I have to change them. And I did, and people were fine.
Mhm.
And now I change things, like I change my schedule ever so often whenever I change locations. And most clients are understanding of it. Like I obviously have to hold space for if they have feelings, because some people do have feelings. And
Mhm.
that's okay. That doesn't mean you shouldn't change your time. But I feel like as therapists, it's so easy for us to like get so anxious about not upsetting our clients and having our
Mhm.
clients, putting ourselves in difficult position for our clients, which it's like I understand to some degree. Like we are a business, like we are providing a service, and so we need to be very mindful of our clients. But like this idea that you can never see clients in the morning, or you only have to have clients in the evenings because that's the best time for your clients. I think it's such a
Mhm.
misconception.
Yeah.
I think clients are, unless you have you see surgeons,
Mhm.
or you
But
see
even then,
teachers.
yeah,
But even
teachers are
then,
the
I've had a
hardest.
teacher and
Yeah.
she would see me during her office hour or like her planning period or something. Like, so I think therapists, like we get so rigid in our heads about how something has to work, but
Mhm.
there's so much flexibility.
Yeah.
Like it's just I think that, yeah, so that's just like one of the misconceptions is that that you have to run it exactly how it's in the United States, and the time zone makes it too complicated. But I also think too, the other thing about time zones is that a lot of people are having to see 25 or even 20, 25, 30 plus clients because it's so expensive in the United States. And if you have an in-person office, then it's even more expensive. And you just have to see a certain amount of clients to live a certain lifestyle. But when you're living in other countries or you kind of live abroad fuller time, I've seen 13 to 15 clients a week. Like
Mhm.
3 to 4 clients a day, and living high on the hog.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm
Yeah.
living well. That's like, I charge like $200+ an hour. So that is, what, $9,000 to $11,000 a month. But like when my overhead for my business and my living expenses is like $3,000, like,
Wow. Wow.
like
Mhm.
there's so much wiggle room. I could probably even see less people. But that I think is another thing when it comes to time zones. It's like, okay, yeah, you're thinking like, oh, how am I going to fit 30 clients in when I'm
Mhm.
living in Europe? But it's like, well, you're going to be living in Europe and you can probably find a place that you can live where your living expenses are make you very comfortable seeing 10 to 15 clients a week.
Mhm.
But I think it's just like one of those things where, like I said, I think we get so stuck on one idea. It's hard to imagine something different.
Right.
And I think that's just like one of the things. It's like, yeah, I only have to see 13 clients a week, which is like wonderful. You know, I feel like
Hmm.
so many of us want to see that many a week. Like any more than that is really draining. And so yeah, I feel like
That
that's
takes
something
some
I
of the
like to
pressure
tell.
off of marketing too, because you don't have to bring in as
Yes.
many people.
Yes, exactly. I think that is like very true. And a lot of us, like, I feel like a lot of therapists don't like think that. They're like, oh, I have to, you know, when it comes to marketing, like I have to generate so many leads. But like once you build a practice, like, and you provide quality care, you probably don't need more than a couple a month, if that.
Hmm. Right,
Like, and
right.
once you like have a stable long-term caseload, my books have been closed for a while. Like I haven't
Uh-huh.
had to take anyone new on, you know,
Yeah,
but it's just
yeah.
the building part. But after that, it's like it's really a dream. Private
Hmm.
practice is wonderful.
It is. It is. Yeah. When it's rolling. In the early stages, it does
Yes,
suck.
it
We will
is.
validate that it sucks, but
Yes,
it's
it
in the
does.
early
It
stages.
takes work.
But it's temporary suckage.
Yes. I know. I started my practice in 2021, end of 2021, beginning of 2022, and
Good
it was a
timing.
lot of work. But I'm like, look
Mhm.
at me now. I'm like
Yeah.
I have so much freedom and I'm living well, and I just like I can't believe there's some therapists who, like I just like my heart hurts for them where they're seeing insurance clients and working 30 plus hours. I'm like, how are you living? How are you alive?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard.
It is. It
But it's like,
is.
choosing your heart.
And I think that's a conversation I've been having with people a lot lately, right? It's like
Yeah.
I find that there's just like it's going to be hard no matter what. Like
Hmm.
you said, which heart do you want? Do you want
Yes.
the I'm having to market and this puts me out there in a way I'm not comfortable with, or do you want to be broke?
Yeah.
Or do you want to
Broke
work
and like
at an
emotionally
agency?
dead
Yeah, yeah,
because you're like depleted.
totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to make sure that people
Yes.
can get in touch with you. We're going to put your info in the show notes.
Yes.
And yeah, and then you're doing a training for the Abundance Party.
Yes. In
So
August. I'm so
yeah.
excited.
So we'll have an opportunity for people to ask you lots of questions, hopefully, and for you to
Yes.
dive deeper. So for those of you listening
Yes.
who are not yet in the Abundance Party, come and join us. And I look forward to learning more and fantasizing more. Just not in the place of
Yes.
my life where I can do this, but I keep ending up watching shows that I don't know are set in Tuscany, reading books that I don't know were going to be set in Tuscany. Like it keeps showing up, and I'm like, I get it, I get it. I'm supposed to be somewhere with an olive grove.
Yes. The universe is speaking to you. It's like
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
come to the beauty of Italy.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I love it.
Amazing. Well, I will talk with you soon.
Yes,
Talk to you
okay.
later.
Bye.
Bye.